What's up, bro? Give me that bag. I said give me the bag. Okay, chill. Man, everything here is useless. You know I can't read. Where's the cash at?
I didn't even.
Wow, that's crazy, dude. So you took everything?
Yeah, dude, he was gonna stab me.
Man, dude, people are getting until they see the other guy that has a gun. Dude, you should get a gun, man.
Are you serious? You know I can't.
Dude, take mine then, man. Don't even worry about it. My dad's out of town for a couple months, so you can just take mine.
Wait, what? Thanks.
Hey, what's up? Thanks for watching the second episode of The Exchange. Today we'll be talking about the issue of guns. Now, we completely understand that the issue of guns is a very complex and divisive issue, and we can't discuss everything that needs to be discussed in one video alone. In the future, we may have more videos with different perspectives and different examples as they come along in the course of time. But today we'll be doing a preliminary discussion about guns, gun violence, and maybe certain gun policies that we find to be discussion worthy. So as we know, the public awareness of mass shootings and gun violence as a whole has significantly increased in contemporary times due to technology and mass media. Due to this awareness, many differing opinions on how gun violence and rights should be handled in the government have arisen. While laws and restrictions vary from state to state, the federal minimum age is 18 years for shotguns and rifles and 21 years to purchase any other firearm, for example, handguns. Now, fugitives, felons, those with mental illness, and those caught possessing or using controlled substances in the past year are prohibited from using firearms. And the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993 requires a background check for FFLs, which stands for Federal Firearm Licenses. But this can be potentially circumvented by the gun show loophole, which means that in certain private exchanges of guns and firearms, background checks aren't necessarily needed. Alright, so on my left here we have Daniel Shin. Hello, Daniel.
Hi. Should I introduce myself?
Yes, you should introduce yourself. And on my right we have Daniel Shin. What's up, Daniel?
What's up? I'm Daniel Shin. I'm one of the few conservatives living in California. A little misplaced, but it's alright.
It's alright, alright. Yes, you should introduce yourself.
Okay, well, I'm a conservative student at West High School, and I became conservative by listening to some Ben Shapiro, and yeah.
Alright, and Daniel, you've been on the show before.
Should I introduce myself?
Do you have any particular inclination to the topic of guns?
I've actually was really into researching about guns. It was a very controversial topic that I thought shouldn't really be controversial.
Okay. And on my right here we have Isha Pendam. Hi, Isha.
I'm a moderate conservative. I got into politics through my speech and debate program at West High School, and just my family always talking about politics at home.
Alright. So we'll start with the break. Now, I wanted to hear each of your opinions on the general overview of how guns and gun policy is treated and handled in America. So we'll start with you, Danielle. What is your general stance on guns and gun policy in the United States?
I think there are plenty of laws put in place, and I think rather than creating new ones, I think enforcing the ones already put in place would be more beneficial.
And could you provide any examples of specific laws that you think we could enforce better, or is it just a general, all laws that pertain to guns?
I think all laws generally, but there's a lot of laws like Project Exile, where if you're a felon or someone that's not allowed to get a gun, if they have possession of a gun, then the punishments would be much harsher, but that was not that was taken away from like many states, and it's only existing in I think New York.
I see. And for you, Isha, what would your general overview on this topic be?
I think there's many different solutions proposed to guns. Some people think it's mainly mental health. Some people think it's that certain people are getting access to guns easily. But I think it's a more of a holistic solution, that you need some of this and some of that and some of this. And I do believe that you need to reinforce some laws and make sure that they're actually implemented. But I think that there are certain precautions that need to be taken and certain things that do need to be added to prevent more tragedies from occurring.
Okay. Alright, so we'll keep that in mind as we move along today's discussion. So now we'll go into in the case of. We'll be going over specific cases on gun violence in America, and we'll be hearing each of your opinions on how these cases were handled and your opinions on how they should be handled in the future. So we'll start with the most recent gun shooting in America, at least the most recent as of today. The August 31st West Texas shooting. Now the suspect was apparently fired from their job before the shooting, but he was already enraged beforehand. So he had applied to get a gun before but failed a background check. So he actually got the gun that was used in the shooting from the gun show loophole from a private exchange. And apparently he had called the FBI before with rambling statements of supposedly hatred and just real signs of mental illness. So this is the most recent shooting, so I feel like it is appropriate to discuss what your opinions on cases like these and cases like these in the past. So we'll start with you, Daniel. What do you believe is a problem in these scenarios, if there is one?
I think cases like this is like a good example of laws not doing what they were supposed to. Mm-hmm. Clearly, this person already failed the background check, whether he was mentally or whatever unfit to get a gun. Mm-hmm. And I think by using these loopholes, it's like when you get these private exchanges through loopholes, if the person you're exchanging it with is aware that you're not allowed to get it in the first place because of whether he was a felon or misdemeanor or whatever, I think this wouldn't have happened if he followed the law.
Okay. And so do you believe it's primarily the fault of the laws not doing what they were meant to do?
Yeah, I think rather than a gun issue, this would be more of a mental health issue.
Mental health issue, okay. And do you have anything to address to that, or would you like to give your own opinion?
I agree with that. I think that the gun show loophole does exist as seen here. Mm-hmm. I think not only focusing on licensed dealers, but also private owners who sell guns and are not really required to, or overseen as are they giving background checks or not, or seeing who they're selling the gun to. I think that's a huge issue that we do need to address. Mm-hmm. Because yeah, if I fail a background check and I want to get a gun, I have an easy way to get it. Mm-hmm. That's not even like a black market where it's hard to like find a resource. That's just us not taking right steps towards eliminating guns from the hands of those who shouldn't have them. So I think that's a step that we should take, one part of the solution.
I see. So both of you guys would agree on the fact that we need to start enforcing laws that prevent such loopholes from happening. Okay. So now we'll go on into the Louisville Kroger shooting in October 24th, 2018. Now this was a case where the shooter, Gregory Allen Bush, primarily targeted African Americans in a Kroger supermarket and killed 2 people. But Dominic Rozier, a gun-owning citizen, fired back on him, forcing Bush to flee. Now this was actually a case where a gun-owning citizen was able to stop a mass shooting from furthering the harms of their own intentions. And it's also important to note that Bush, which was the shooter, was previously ordered by a judge to surrender his guns and undergo mental health treatment after a domestic violence dispute with his father. Alright, so this time we'll start with you, Isha. What do you believe about this case that you think you would like to address?
I think one thing we should talk about is the fact that a law-abiding citizen who had a gun was able to do good by owning a gun. Mm-hmm. So it's not, let's get rid of all guns, let's repeal the Second Amendment. I think there's a use to it. people who own guns use their guns legally from like 30,000 to 5,000 times a year. Like they use their guns a lot for good purposes, whether it's hunting, like recreational hunting, or target practice, or whatever it is. They use it properly. So I don't think this is a good example of us showing, okay, we should not repeal Second Amendment or take any extreme measures like that. I do think though, it's because it's someone with a mental illness. They're obviously, the reason we don't give them guns is because they're not in the right state of mind to make right decisions with weapons like that. And we can't expect them, if the court says, go to a mental health facility, get fixed or whatever, turn in your gun, and if you don't follow up with that, you have no way of knowing if they did it or not, and high chances are they didn't do it. And so I think it's also a fault of the federal government on their side, the court's fault for not following up and seeing if he actually went with what they said.
Enforcement.
Yes.
Okay. And you, Daniel, do you have anything to comment on that, or would you like to give me one?
I think this was like a perfect example of. It's rather common, the defensive use of firearm. It's actually a lot more common than aggression and like committing crimes. According to, I think, Centers for Disease Control, CDC, there's about 500,000 to 3 million people's lives that are saved yearly because of defensive use of firearm, compared to like the 30,000 deaths in America due to guns, and 2/3 of that being actually suicide. So.
Okay. Now, these are two cases that, so the Louisville Kroger shooting occurred with handguns primarily.
Right.
Do you believe that there should be any steps taken to address, let's say, rifles or more supposedly scary guns that others may believe are more dangerous? Or do you believe that the current laws that we have regarding those guns are adequate as of now? And we'll start with Daniel.
And the fact is, in the country with over 300 million guns, we have more long guns like rifles and shotguns than handguns. And the fact that more than like 90% of these crimes are committed by handguns, not by long guns and like scary guns that the politicians are trying to ban. I think it's very disingenuous. There's a port of entry where you can seek asylum and you can determine whether it's valid or not. And yeah, I thought it was very disingenuous of you to say that Trump was oh shit. It's very disingenuous to propose like common sense gun regulations when the purpose of that is to save lives, but it's kind of counterintuitive.
Okay, so do you believe that these supposed common sense gun reform laws that would attack ownership of rifles and shotguns, do you believe that they wouldn't be effective in addressing the problem of gun violence in America?
Yeah, I think if anything, it would affect the law-abiding citizens from self-protection, because generally when you rob someone's house, you don't take a long gun with you. You generally take a pistol or handgun, and AR-15s and like long guns are like, people prefer to use that for self-defense, home defenses. People don't usually carry that around. It's usually home where they can use it for self-preservation.
All right, and you, do you have anything to address on that, or?
I agree with that. I think there is obviously that misconception that majority of mass shootings and deaths by guns in general are through AR-15s and assault weapons, even though it's a very broad term and very vague. They're mostly with pistols and handguns, yes. Actually, I've seen multiple cases, I can't name them right now, but there are multiple cases where actually some people having AR-15s on them saved lives in an incident, like as defensive gun use, and it actually saved lives and stopped tragedies from occurring. So I think in some ways, it all depends on the person who uses it, not really what gun they have.
Okay. So, just as a quick diversion, how would you guys respond to the Las Vegas shooting, where the perpetrator used a modified gun in order to commit a massive crime?
I think that's a very secluded case where it doesn't apply for the majority of these cases, and the fact that one person committed a crime like that to take away the right of everybody else in the country, I think that is not a good policy.
I see. And you?
The shooter actually bought many, like tens of rifles and I think also shotguns prior to the incident. There's actually a law in place that states that if someone buys more than these many guns, then they're like subject to like check to see what they're doing, and whether he used all those guns in the shooting or not, it would still be suspicious if you bought more than even like 3 guns at the same time. Like I think that's something that we should, like one added regulation that we should have. Like okay, if you buy more than 3 guns, what are you doing with those? Like, are you a threat? Because that looks suspicious now. Like why do you have so many? I think for the sake of self-defense, you only need like 1 or 2 max. I don't think you need any more than that. So I think if they had seen that he bought so many and then taken action on it, we wouldn't even have had that. Las Vegas wouldn't even been a thing. So.
I see. And do you have anything to respond to that, or?
I mean, to be honest, I kind of disagree with one of the points she made there, when she said like you shouldn't really need more than 2 or 3 guns. I don't think the government has the right to tell you what type of guns you can and can't have to like for your own self-preservation, and it should be open for you. Like a lot of people prefer AR-15s because it's easier to use, easier to aim, stuff like that, and some people might prefer shotguns. So I think that just depends on the person, and like because it is a constitutional right, just because they buy those things, I don't think like the government should be like, I don't know, like supervising them in some way, because like I mean a person can buy like 15 cars, like nobody suspects that they're just gonna go around and just run everybody over with them.
Okay. And do you have anything to respond to that?
I think it's not the type of guns they buy, but more the amount. Maybe 2 or 3, yeah, but the amount he bought was like very excessive. Like it was a lot of rounds and a lot of guns, and I think that should have rung some bells and been like, okay, maybe we should see what this guy's doing, because that's like way too many for any number of members in a family or whatever it is. So.
And would you agree with that or disagree?
Not necessarily.
Okay. And what would you have to say to that?
I think having as many guns as you want is a right. Like you can't really just say, oh, like we're gonna draw the line at 5 or we're gonna draw the line at 2. It's whatever the person wants. It's their right.
So do you believe that it's their choice to own as many guns as they want, as they are the ones purchasing it, and they have the right to purchase?
Yeah, because in a country, they have the right to pursue happiness. If that's what brings them joy, then let them get their guns. Because I mean, just because they buy guns, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to go shoot everybody.
Right.
So I mean, if they just have a hobby of collecting guns, then let them pursue whatever they want.
So it sounds like what you are supporting is the idea that while we aren't taking away necessarily or blocking them from buying as many guns as you want, do you believe that it would be beneficial to at least do certain precautionary checks
Right.
on certain people who buy large amounts of guns?
Right. So like when you buy like 1 gun, you have like a background check. If you're buying like a large amount of guns, I think like just to see like, so exactly what are you planning to do with all of them? Like I know it's their right and they can have them, but if you did a further investigation and saw, okay, maybe this guy might have a little bit of a, maybe he's not mentally stable properly, but it's never been like reportable, or like whatever it is, you want to be careful. But I don't think we should like put a cap, but I think if it reaches a certain amount, we should have like an extra check just to be safe.
And how would you respond to that?
I don't necessarily agree.
Okay.
I mean, because I think you're basically criminalizing someone for just buying a gun and just exercising their right. And I think that they should just be treated equally as everybody else. And,
Regardless of how many guns.
yeah, I don't think you should criminalize or just notify the police just because this person has this of how many guns they have.
Okay. And would you guys like to continue this discussion, or?
That's about it.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Okay. All right. So now we'll move on into the 3-pointer. So these 3 points, I believe, will spark a lot of discussion on really the cause of gun violence and maybe the cause of the increased awareness of gun violence as a whole, and maybe some possible policy discussions as well. So my first question is, who do you believe is mostly at fault for gun violence that happens in America? So we'll start with you, Shin.
I do think it's not the gun, it's the person who shoots the gun. I definitely agree with that. But I've read many cases where this person was mentally unstable and then a federal agency or whoever, the military, whoever it was, failed to report that. So that when they did the background check when they bought the gun, it didn't come up. So I think you can't expect someone who's mentally unstable to make right decisions because we're obviously not trusting them with guns. So, I mean, the federal government should be on top of things. And if one of them was, it was so bad that they had to be like honorably discharged from the military. And if it's something that it's that bad, like it's not just like PTSD or whatever it is, then that's something that should have like been reported and put in the system like that. It should have been very quick, except it wasn't. And I think that's something that the federal government should take care of, not just implementing policy on their citizens, but going back and checking if they're doing things right as well.
Okay. And do you have anything to respond to that, or would you like to provide your?
Well, I agree with what she says, but to add on, like I agree that it's the person at fault, like the person that shoots the person. I also think it's the fault of the media. Like when a shooting happens, the next day they're broadcasted. They're probably like top show for like next week or two, and I think by making them like sort of like a celebrity, I think in many cases actually, people try to copy what other people do, and I think that's not a good way to address this problem. The news, the media.
And that actually segues into the next three-pointer. To what extent do you believe mass media affects public awareness and public perception of gun violence in America? We'll start with you, Daniel.
I think it gives them especially with this left-leaning media, I think it gives them a false perception of like reality, because like everybody knows like the Parkland shooting.
Another
one.
one.
Kids were shot, but like couple, was it before or after? But similar, close to that date, there was also another shooting that was actually a lot deadlier than this Parkland shooting. It was in Sutherland Spring in Texas. It killed many people at a church, but it was a NRA certified instructor that shot down the shooter with the AR-15. But that person was never like interviewed for any news. So like I think it was like the media is very disingenuous and dishonest when it comes to many of these cases, and they just push their narrative with all these shootings. I think rather than actually mourning for the death of these people, I think they just use that as an opportunity to spread their agenda.
I see. And what would you respond to that?
I agree with that. I don't want to go into a different topic here, but I think that sorry, that deals with like polarization in the nation. There's so much left-leaning media out there. It's very hard to find like a news channel that's like even remotely right. I think that's a huge issue. For example, I don't know if I should talk about this.
Go ahead.
For example, when you have a white police officer shoot a black man, it becomes a huge story. And if it's racist, I get it. Like, it's bad and it's racist. Yes, it should get news coverage and justice should come out of it. But there's actually more black on black crime than there is white on black crime. And because that doesn't fit these people are racist, this injustice, it doesn't create more injustice, it doesn't bring more justice out of it, it's not as bad as the others. The media doesn't talk about it enough. So I think the media is being biased to what they pick and choose to tell. They're not being truthful and honest like they should be. So.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, yeah, I think we generally agree with what Anisha said.
I see. All right, and now we'll move into a minor discussion on policy, specifically gun policy in schools. Now, there have been certain perspectives and certain opinions that have believed that teachers in schools should be armed to prevent school shootings from happening. So how would you respond to this issue?
This one's tricky. I think classrooms should have weapons, but I'll explain on that. I don't think it's necessary for teachers to have guns. but I think there should be some form of self-defense. I think your biggest thing is that when a shooter comes on campus, they don't expect the students to fight back. I feel like that's one of the biggest things. So like you barricade for as long as possible, you do whatever. They still come in. I think the fact that you're ready to fight, say you're all poised in different directions. Like for example, in my English class, right next to the door, we have like this tall cabinet thing. And she said, if there's ever a school shooter, we're gonna have someone sit on top of there, and the moment he comes in, you just hit him right on the head with a bat. So there's certain things like that, certain tactics that you can use that have the element of surprise, so you don't necessarily need a gun to defeat them, but you instead use surprise to defeat them, because they're in the zone of, oh, I'm the one killing everybody, no one's gonna fight back because I have a gun or I have a rifle or a shotgun or whatever it is, PTSD or whatever it is. The fact that you're actually fighting back, they're gonna be shocked. It's gonna have them pause for a second, and that's like your best bet. But obviously you can't expect students to be that prepared. But I mean, there's no way, even if you did have a gun, that you could ever be that prepared. So I don't think guns necessarily, but I think there should be some multiple forms of weapons in each class.
And how would you respond to that?
You said teachers. That's very broad. I thought.
Oh, well, I guess,
'cause
yeah, maybe just we'll open up the question into.
I think it should be teachers that are like former military, former police, or someone that actually has received the training. I don't think it's too much of a burden for just a regular teacher to just carry a firearm and stuff like that. But I definitely think that this is something that can actually lower school shootings in general, because the thing is, like, everything we want to defend and protect, there's generally like a gun. Like if it's a bank, money, because we value money, we want to protect it. That's why we use something that would actually protect it, guns. So I think students should, every life is more valuable than money, and in a place like a gun-free zone where majority of the shootings happen, I think that by putting a gun there, like, it will use the element of surprise too. But what I don't agree with Isha is that I think a gun is necessary, because if you're going to give them a weapon, a bat, why not just give them a weapon that's more efficient at doing the job? Like if it's going to be the weapon to stop school shootings or stuff like that, you might as well give them something that would be more effective and be more effective at doing the job.
I see. And how would you respond to that?
I do get ex-military because they are more trained with guns. The reason I don't think it's necessary to have guns is actually one of my teachers is in the military currently. And the whole time, he's very honest about his opinions. He's very, very honest about what he believes and what the school does and all that. And so the entire time we're going through the school safety drill training, never once did he mention, oh, it would be better if we had a gun, or even hinted at that or replied. He said, what we have now is enough. He talked continuously about how the element of surprise, no matter what the weapon, it's not the weapon itself, but the fact that you're willing to fight back, and those extra 1-2 seconds that you get between the moment the shooter's shooting or and pauses, because he's like, whoa, these guys are fighting back. That's your biggest advantage, not the weapon you have. And from the reason I value that opinion so much is because it's coming from someone who is in the military, who would probably be like, I think maybe it's time we take bigger action towards that. Which is why I believe that guns are not really necessary. Yeah.
I feel like if it were to be legal, that teacher would have definitely preferred to have a gun over a bat or any other element of surprise, because essentially when you have a weapon that can actually fire a projectile, teachers from across the classrooms can help, where they can at least walk up and shoot. They don't have to run across the hallway while the shooter has a gun,
Right.
to actually stop the shooter. I think it'll be much scarier for the perpetrator to have to be going against the armed populace than armed populace with bats.
Are there any specific detriments that you're worried about with the fact that teachers would be armed, or?
I think another thing is security in schools. It's not just are we protecting the kids, but kids are stupid. It makes teachers be more wary of who's in their class, who's not in their class. If the teacher says, "Hey," if they're in they're in the field, it says, "Hey, can you run to my classroom and get this thing?" Then it opens the door to someone has the keys, someone can get a mold of the keys, someone can get the gun. How much money do you have to spend to make sure the gun is in a secure place? Then after that, when someone's actually shooting, you gotta have to get the key, find the key out of the whole bunch of keys they have. You gotta open it, you gotta take it out, you gotta disarm the safety, you gotta shoot, it's like a whole thing and a whole process. You're not only trying to protect the kids, but you're also trying to protect the gun from the kids, because teenagers are stupid and you don't know exactly what you're going to do. And so I think and especially a school is going to be super cautious of who can access the gun and who can't. So I think also the security measures you have to storing the gun costs a lot of money, like a lot of money, and also add extra time to actually responding back to the shooter. So.
I see. And how would you respond to that?
The gun wouldn't actually be in like the front desk drawer. Like it would be locked up, sealed, and unlocked. So the only teacher can access it. No student should be able to access a firearm during school. And whether the teacher is efficient at carrying out the protection of his students is a different issue. Like, because generally when a lockdown happens, like teachers have time. Generally, students are inside a classroom, teachers inside a classroom. When it's lunch, they're still inside a classroom. They're gonna have easy access to guns. And I think rather than rummaging through for a bat, it would be more time efficient to just open the lock. You know exactly where it is, you know exactly what the password is. Like, it doesn't have to be a key necessarily. It can be a code or anything. I think that will just be a lot more efficient than a bat.
I see.
My thing is also when we're going through these safety training things, we talk a lot about time, how timing is very, very important, which is why like the weapons in the class, like some classes we have like a bat, or like one of my teachers has like a spear-like thing, not very spear, but it's pointy enough to surprise and startle someone. But he keeps all those like weapons very in reach and very easily accessible that you just pick it up and you go type of thing. Even if you do have a code and you do have all that, like the 2 seconds that you have, or 1 to 2 seconds you have, are so very vital that if you pause to put in a code, you're trembling, you put in the wrong code, or you press the wrong button, or you didn't push the pound before you put in the code. Like, there's so many things that could go wrong in the heat of the moment. Also, if it's not necessarily that every teacher has to be in their class. So if it's something that's during class time, then I get it. There's like, you have time to like get the gun and stuff. That's fine. But if it's like during lunch, some teachers who are trained or ex-military or who are eligible to have the guns might not be in their classrooms or be close to their classrooms to even get it. Some of it may be the first person accessible to the gun is all the way on this side of campus, and the shooter's all the way on this side of campus. So they gotta run all the way there. And how long is it going to take for another teacher who has a gun on this side of campus to go get the gun and go defend the students from the attacker? Because your most viable option for killing as many people, as sick as it sounds, is coming in during like lunchtime, where most of the people are outside, so you don't have to like target specific classrooms. But I think that there's so many ifs that, like, yeah, it could work, but I don't think investing that much money, there's a lot of chances that it can't work and it won't work, and that it might take too much time. So
well, you addressed like many points, but to break it down first, you said like, so basically the whole point of the safe, right, the gun, it's so that it's out of reach from students, right, because
right.
It's dangerous.
Right.
If you have spears and bats just in the classroom, like if there's a mentally ill student or someone that just takes aggression and might just pull out a gun, what stops them from just pulling out the bat and just beating the kid next to it? So what's the difference? It's just a weapon of choice. It's the individual's decision making would probably be the same. It's to harm a different person, whether that be a gun over there or a bat. Why is the bat not locked up?
I think it's right weapon of choice, but it's also school shooters or people who want to harm people in their school or whoever it is look for an efficient weapon of choice. If you take a bat and you start beating people up, that's going to take a while to crack their skull open. By that time, you're going to have a bunch of people on top of you. If you have a gun, you shoot you shoot a couple times, you've already got a couple people dead. It's so much more quicker. It's so much. It's kind of bad that I'm saying this, but it's so much more efficient that like a bat takes a longer time, which is why it's not really a weapon of choice and very useful in this circumstance. But guns are.
Okay, and secondly, you addressed that it would be too slow, right?
I'm saying like in certain if situations that could
like,
be possible.
Thing is like the average, I think, according to the DOJ, I think the average length of a school shooting is like about 13 minutes, and generally in virtually all cases, it's a good guy with a gun that stops a bad guy with a gun. So I mean, a teacher with a bat, I mean that's a good plan, but generally that's not what happens. It's a person, a police, or somebody, whether they suicide, it's a person with a gun that takes out the person with the gun. So when the average school shooting length is about 13 minutes and the average police response time is 18 minutes, I think there's like a big difference between not having teachers that are armed versus just relying on the police or relying on students to get on top of them. Right. So I think like an armed teacher, whether that's, I mean, because running from campus to campus, that might be a minute or two when you're running versus 18 minutes average police response time. So I think in either way, it's more efficient to have a gun at a school place.
Anything to respond?
Just one question. When you said, who did you want, like which teachers did you want to have guns?
Former military, former police, there's actually like a lot of people that are former military that want to serve, or even current military, like teacher you have.
Alright.
Or someone that just is licensed and actually knows what they're doing. I'm not saying like if you want to become a teacher you have to like have that. If that's like a choice that the teacher wants to make and invest time into and actually learn to actually use the gun, then that's their choice. But I'm not going to force teachers to carry guns against their will.
Right.
So yeah.
Would you guys like to continue this discussion, or do you believe it's...
I think we're good.
Alright. So now we'll move on into our hypothetical what if. Now this what if is actually going to be very open-ended. If you were calling the shots and you could implement one change into how guns are handled in America, what would that be? And let's just assume that it would, automatically be passed. You wouldn't have to worry about getting it approved or anything like that. What do you believe is the one thing that is most essential to fixing the gun issue in America? And I'll give you a bit of time to think about that.
You should give us this question ahead of time, dude.
So we'll start with you, Isha.
I think one of the issues I brought up earlier today was the issue of the federal, like, official side of things not getting stuff into the system when they should. And I think for about 15 out of 19 that I read, that was the issue. So I think that we should implement legislation or tighten, like, those officials' jobs who put in this information into the system, that they have to get it in within a certain amount of time, and if they don't get it in, then there's like a punishment or whatever. Like it's a law now. Like you have to get it in by this time, and if they're not fulfilling their jobs, they're like subject to being fired or whatever it is. Because a lot of these shootings were caused by mentally unstable people who were able to get guns because the federal government didn't do their job. So I think that's one part of the whole solution to
another one
mass shootings going on.
I see. And what would your stance be?
I think we just have to enforce the laws already in place. I think if anything we would strengthen the punishments for these criminal acts. I think that because I don't think like new policies would generally help because it's well regulated enough. And at this point, if more policies would just hurt the law-abiding citizens from actually being able to defend themselves, because we see in like many, if not majority of these cases, it's actually a vast majority of these cases, it's an illegal gun, that's illegally obtained gun that is used to create these mass killings. It's generally not a law-abiding citizen that got the gun legally that are carrying out these acts. It's the mentally ill. It's the felons. It's the people that shouldn't even have guns in the first place that are committing these crimes.
I see. So you would take the stance that we need to ensure that the people who are overseeing the mentally ill and the enforcement of guns should be held accountable, and you would take the position that we need to simply enforce and strengthen the punishments of our existing gun laws. Yeah. I see. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming in today. I appreciated the discussion. All right. And today, while we might have had two people on the same political spectrum, we were still able to see that we had a bit of minor disagreement on certain issues, but let's please take this lesson to understand the fact that even if we have the same opinions and different sub-opinions on different topics, we can still come together and have civil, rational discussion about them. Thank you very much for watching.
Hey fool, you know the routine? Bet you can't even use that.
Sure hope I don't have to use that today.